Hi, this is Max at Medium 2, and today we have Ray Katz, a Medium writer who covers mostly climate change. I'm very excited to have him. Been reading his articles for a while. So I'm going to let Ray introduce himself. He also has an organization, I believe, We Are the Saners. In other words, like a sane person would maybe not want to for their kids to boil in the ocean, stuff like that. So anyway, on to you, Ray.
Hi. I just want to tell you how I became uh, a person who founded this group because it was really sort of an unlikely thing for me to do. Um, I was aware of the climate situation for a long time. I first probably became really aware of it around 1992, even though I was more aware of it earlier. I happened to go to a Borders bookstore near me at that time, and I met the author of a new book called Earth in the Balance, who was promoting his book, and that was Al Gore. And at the time, people had some idea that there was something possibly happening with the climate. At least some people did. But he sort of helped bring it to the fore. And from that moment on, I was aware of it as a problem. And it was never too far from the front of my mind. But my view was, even though I am not a tremendously confident in governments and businesses to always do the right thing, I thought that leaders everywhere have the sense to not want to destroy the planet we all live on, the same way that they didn't want to blow up the planet we live on with nuclear weapons. So I thought, okay, we got a problem. I'm aware of it, but these folks will address it because whatever shortcomings they have, it's at least within their own self-interest for their if they care about their own families, for them to do something. Well, fast forward to nowadays, and I'm seeing, holy moly, they've done nothing. Where we've had 27 UN meetings, and they've announced all kinds of breakthroughs, and our carbon emissions are increasing. And I'm thinking, well, okay, that's a problem, but I'm not an activist. And there are plenty of activists, and there are plenty of activist groups who are doing stuff. And all of them are probably, more skilled and experienced at being an activist than I am. There is no reason for me to do anything other than sign up and join some other group. But I looked around and I didn't find a group that I had confidence that they were going to get the results we needed. Um, I hope I'm wrong. There are a lot of groups, and anyone that succeeds, that'll make me very happy. So our group is not in competition with any other group. We are in support of every honest, sincere effort to address the crisis, and we want someone to succeed. It does not have to be us. However, there was sort of, I would call, a hole in the market, a place where people who are not normal climate activists, people like me, people who's essentially a newbie activist, can participate without having the kind of skills, experience, and comfort level with being an activist that those other folks do. I was thinking about the world as a whole right now, and I'm thinking there's a lot of people with climate anxiety. They know there's a problem. They feel fear. They feel worry. They, like me, see that nothing meaningful has been done, and they are starting to say, this is it, or we're in big trouble, or I don't know what to do. And those folks have tried voting, and they've tried protesting, and they feel alone and hopeless and scared. And I think that those are very rational emotions. I feel some of all of that myself. And the reason why all of these people feel that way is because they are not a unit. They all do feel alone. You don't see in the media, you see articles in the media saying we have climate anxiety and the anxiety is a problem. You see all these kinds of other articles, but you don't see the urgency of this is an actual crisis, not something that you can. Well, if your house is on fire, you don't call a committee to hold a meeting at the UN or in Dubai to plan things. What you do is you uh, get water and throw it on the fire if your house is on fire. You do something. And so what I'm trying to do is address and awaken the people who feel something really should be done and it isn't being done. So we have to make it happen. I want those people to become aware of themselves, because I feel like the actual number of people who feel this way, who are ready to do something, but don't because they feel hopeless and alone and that they have no power, I think that there's literally more than 1 billion such people. We have 8 billion people on the planet. There has to be at least 1 billion, 1 out of 8, who care and would like to do something because they're worried about their own children and whether their children have a future. So I started this group with that in mind. I am not recruiting anybody. I am merely trying to find the people who already feel this way and are in spirit already members of this group. And I'm trying to let them know, here is the place where you can go, where you'll be with others who understand the problem. And then, of course, there's the bigger problem. And there's the problem that all the other climate groups have been wrestling with, which is, okay, great, we're aware there's a problem. How do we make something happen? Greta Thunberg's done an amazing thing. She has millions of people, kids across the world, skipping school on Fridays to make a statement. And she's tried doing other things, and she's certainly spoken up, and her voice has been heard, but she herself will tell you there's been no real progress. We're still burning more and more fossil fuels. We're getting deeper and deeper into the hole. So I said, all right, I'm not a genius. I'm not as smart as Greta. I'm not as smart as the people at these other groups who have been thinking like activists for years. And I said, well, what can I do? And what can we do? Even if I got 1 million people together, what can we do? Or 1 billion. And then I said, well, I don't have to be smart. I just have to understand what smart people have figured out. And so I went back and I thought, and I reread about Gandhi and King and other people who led movements who had no formal authority and did big things like oust the British from India, or end segregation in the American South. And I said, okay, I don't know whether I'm smart enough to figure out how to do it in this circumstance, but I can see how people with no authority, people like me, people like all the people who I think should be and may become members of our group, I can see that they can succeed. I don't know if they will or we will succeed. It depends on our execution. So now the question is, how do we adopt a framework that's worked in other circumstances to work today with our situation and our activists? And our situation is very different. And each time it's very different. So Cesar Chavez, who helped grape growers and migrant workers get treated humanely finally. He had his own tactics, but they were all based on the same framework. They're all, first of all, nonviolent movements, and they have a moral basis, and that they actually apply moral force, which is the most underrated force in the world. And I say this because even people who are passionate activists, they're losing faith in nonviolence, but I haven't. I think it has to be applied really, really thoughtfully and intelligently. And I'm hoping that either I or me, along with the brains I bring into this organization, can figure out ways. Now, we already do have ideas, a lot of ideas of a set of steps to take. And the first is still growth and awareness and being visible so that these people don't feel alone, so their numbers are larger. But we have major steps that we can take even with a handful of people. Early next year, we're going to be going a lot faster than we've been going. This group isn't that old. In January, we expect to have an online group using an open source system where we can get together as a community. I've had some video meetings and things like that, but I wanted a place where people can talk with or without me and begin to feel like a group. And I think that's what's most important, is like, it's just kind of comical that there are probably 1 billion people who are desperate and ready to do something, but feel alone. So I don't want them to feel alone. I want them to gel as a unit. So that's how this happened. This happened because we're in a desperate situation. We need to do something. And there are a lot of good efforts being made, but I'm not confident that every effort is being made, and this is a kind of effort that I did not see anyone else engaging in. So that's how we got here. Um, I'll talk a little bit about our objectives and things like that. Well, I originally started out with as a very narrow intention, which is let's do at least the minimum necessary, hopefully more, but at least the minimum necessary to stabilize the climate so that our children have a future. So that was a very simple thing to do. But I realized that even though that remains the core and the focus of this, that can't be the whole thing, because avoiding a negative isn't enough to motivate people, really, in the way I want them to be motivated. So I've begun talking about how, even though no matter what we do, we will be living on a somewhat degraded planet, even if we stabilize it, things in some ways will be worse. I also began talking about how, even so, a lot of things can be better. And I began talking about values and the values that got us into these circumstances, and how a different set of values can make the after these times better on balance, even in a degraded environment. So you'll find some articles, and you'll find a lot written about that. I also try to keep it non-political. I mean, everybody has political positions, but I don't. Well, first of all, I happen to like people regardless. I like a lot of people who disagree with me on all sorts of things, and I would hate to exclude them from this. Um, I'm not confident that on every issue and every idea that I am right. But I just want to, for example, say that we are not specifically, for example, anti-capitalist. I actually have an MBA. I have a brother that worked at a very, very large bank. So I'm not hostile towards business. And I think that all societies and all kinds of governments are failing on this. I mean, you have, essentially dictatorships in the Middle East, and those guys are living off oil, and you have our, Exxon oil profiteers in the West. So I think there's enough blame to go around, and I'm not really interested in vilifying anybody. I'm interested in stopping the behaviors and policies that are destroying us. I actually have been trying to position our group as helping not only ourselves and our children and the other species that inhabit this planet with us, but as helping the people who are making these mistakes, because I think a lot of them will feel regret. I think if you're an oil executive and you've been pushing this all along, and then these things increase more and more, and your kids start saying, what the heck have you done to this planet? I'm going to have to live on it. Well, if we stop them from doing the worst, then they don't have the hostility of their children when they're on their deathbeds, So I mean, even if they're going great guns now and they feel like it's their fiduciary responsibility to make more money, even if you're destroying the planet, that we're saving those people from themselves as well. I am not looking for enemies, and I am not looking to fan any hatred of bad guys, because there are no bad guys. There are some bad actions that we have to stop. So it's a certain mindset, this group. At least that's what I'm trying to set for it. And I think the kind of people who will join, who are feeling despair and hopelessness and fear for their children, can be kept focused on not being angry at the bad guys, and instead keeping their eyes on the prize, which is a stable planet and a better life for their children.
Yeah, I sort of see it. Well, I see a different aspect of it. So on Medium, I follow Richard Crim, you, and I don't notice that any of the writers on Medium who really cover climate change have a ton of followers. So
Yeah.
it seems to me that, I mean, I agree with you. There are definitely people that feel that it's hopeless, especially young people. But
Yeah.
I get the feeling that most people just don't even understand what's coming. And I read a lot about it, and I try and explain it to people, and I still can't even give the elevator pitch, I feel, that would really convince somebody who knows nothing what's going to happen and why it's so bad. So could you address that? Why it's so bad? So could you address that? Could you say, like, if
There are. You're first of all, you're right. I mean, I haven't been doing this as long as some of those other writers, but I only have 1,600 or so followers. So you're right. Even the people who are um, interested in climate change, but isn't their center thing. Like I can't remember his name. Umir, Umir.
yeah,
He's a great writer, and he sometimes mentions the climate, but his following isn't based on that. So yeah, I agree that certainly on Medium, and I would say in the world at large, it hasn't taken over the way or drawn that response that it should draw. And I think again, uh, unlike the other writers, I have a very specific thing that they as individuals can do. So I'm hoping that even if they're not all from Medium, that I can spark this kind of interest. I feel, and in fact, I'm almost still saying the same thing you are, because I'm still saying that maybe 7 out of 8 people are not that interested. That leaves 1 out of 8, which becomes a very large number potentially. Now, I don't have 1 out of 8 of even the Medium follower, population. I don't have anywhere near that. But um, uh,
well, I think they're interested. I feel that they even I have trouble understanding it. So when you first read that book from
mhm.
Al Gore, or what are the three things that you feel about climate change that people just don't really understand that really frighten you? I mean, I could tell you mine if you want, but I mean, I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, it's a very complicated thing, but at the core, it's really a very simple thing. We have a greenhouse gas effect that of some sort that is getting worse. And I happen to be interested in space and the history of space flight. And I basically
All
have
right.
been saying that, Earth is on its way to becoming Venus, and you don't want to live on Venus. Um,
No.
so, but I don't think it isn't that people aren't scared enough, and it isn't that people aren't aware. I don't think it's that they're not interested because they think there's nothing they can do, and that we're and also they have day to day responsibilities. So it's not top. If you're raising kids or you're going to college or you're doing whatever you're doing, people are busy, and and to spend your time thinking about something that you feel makes you feel helpless or anxious, you know, I mean, frankly, if I couldn't do anything about it, if I felt for sure I couldn't do anything about it, I wouldn't be thinking about it either. I'd be saying, all right, now what do I do now that we're doomed? But that's as much as thought as I would give to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it feels to me. I mean, I feel like even if we magically got everybody in the world to stop producing so much
Yeah.
CO2, we don't know that our kids, once they get to adults, would say, "Oh, Ray and Max, they're dummies. We're now going to burn it all up." Right? I mean,
It's actually possible, but that doesn't absolve us from responsibility for doing our part, even if a future generation messes it up. But yeah, no, it's there's a lot to be discouraged about. But I also point out, now look, I've even written to say that even if we are doomed, say we've actually reached the point where there's no stopping or stabilizing it. So suppose we've already hit the feedback loop point and we're doomed.
all right.
I'm still saying that we have a moral responsibility to try. But I don't believe that's the case, actually. I mean, my wife's been in touch with Michael Mann, who is one of the top climate uh, scientists in the world, and he
All right.
actually works about a mile from where I am now. And I've been trying to get in touch with him, but I'm trying not to use my wife's name so that I get to him on my own merits. And even James Hansen as well, and who is much more pessimistic than Michael Mann. none of those guys are saying, I give up, it's too late. They still believe that we can do something, but we have to act pretty quickly and pretty decisively. So if they're not giving up and they have more expertise than I do, I really shouldn't be giving up.
Right, but your job is much, much, much harder than theirs, in my opinion, because they're just trying to prove that climate change is a real threat to humanity. Because I still don't believe most people take it seriously, even ones who should know better. Um,
Well,
right. So I mean,
remember though that this is the plus of the negative here. We are now at the point where it's becoming increasingly visible, and there's a higher percentage of people who've been touched by it directly. And this is going to happen more and more in 2024, 2025, and 2026. People, I mean, I was really upset that, for example, there isn't a famous picture of toxic orange smoke hanging over Wall Street. I think if we had that picture and that was as famous as, say, the Earthrise from Apollo 8 photo, I think that would change things. I think you got to tell the story, and you're right. You were sort of asking earlier, what do you say to people to get them to care? And I'm not worried about them caring. I'm worried about the ones who already care not acting, because I think there still are 1 out of 8, which is a billion people who care, who are doing nothing because they feel helpless, hopeless, and alone. So I actually see my job as, I think a little luck is involved here, but I think it's, in some ways, it's not that hard. I think it's easy to fail, and it's easy to succeed in a way. I look at Occupy. Occupy, I know it didn't succeed. They didn't have a clear demand, and they didn't have any of that going. But in terms of growing and becoming visible, they did it overnight. It was amazingly fast and amazingly successful, and there was no hint that movement even existed anywhere in any meaningful way. And I think this movement is an existing latent movement that simply has not appeared. So I don't think anybody built Occupy. I think Occupy was exposed and gave people somewhere to come out of the woodwork and be seen and heard. And I think that's the job here. If the job was persuading people, I'd say, I can't do this. I mean, there's no way I could do this. But I believe that there are more than enough activists to get this done. Remember, even, you know, uh, Gandhi didn't have 100% of the Indians behind them. Big change doesn't require a majority. It, it,
oh
it
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
require anything like that.
right.
So
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I think We Are the Seniors is going to work very well. I mean, I don't know of if somebody said, what's an organization that, let's just say that my house
Mhm.
burnt down, right? And I don't have insurance, whatever. And I'm like, I really want to do something about this. It's the least I can do. I want to be with other people. I want to help. I wouldn't know what to tell them. I'd say, I don't know, Audubon, Greenpeace, I mean, which aren't the correct organizations. So, I mean, I definitely feel that what you're trying to do is, is going to pick up steam. And you're right. Your job is not to convince people that they need to be afraid of the climate or worry about climate change. You're there for when the stock market crashes and everybody's wiped out, and they're like, well, like, what can I do? So don't get me wrong. I mean, even though I'm very negative about people understanding it, I definitely recognize that there, well, maybe there are other organizations, but there's none that I know of. Yours is the first one that I've read about, that would answer that person's need.
Yeah, so that's the intent here. And um, we're at the situation where we have just hundreds of people. We don't even have thousands of people yet. Truthfully, I've only been recruiting for like a couple of months, so we're working on that. But I've come up with things that very small numbers of people can do to be visible without doing anything destructive or horrible. And I'm working on that. And in terms of, and then also in messaging, what can you say? You were talking about elevator speeches. I need, I do need like short phrases and things. Now is the time for all sane people to come to the aid of their planet. We're
Yeah.
trying and testing a lot of different things like that. I am a big fan of the arts as being important in activism, and there was like the Hope poster for Obama, and I I've been envisioning, believe it or not, cartoons to help this movement. Another thing we want to do is we don't want to be the ones with the long faces who are screaming doom. We want to be the ones who are saying, we're going to fix this, but we have to, we're deciding to do this. We're going to be upbeat, and we're even going to be playful. And I think this comes, I personally have a very dark sense of humor, but I always keep upbeat. I had open heart surgery, and when I was being wheeled in there, I was joking with people, and I knew I might not come out. And I said, my view is always, all right, whatever the situation, the world doesn't ask how you feel or anything else. It asks, what are you going to do right now? And so I try and do the right thing. And once I'm doing the right thing, I don't really worry about anything else, at least at that time. So I'm trying to establish that attitude of, here's what we're going to do. Let's do it. Maybe let's have some fun while we're doing it, so that we're sort of, well, there was opposition to Viktor Orban in Hungary. And, he's back, but he was ousted at one point. He was lost an election, and he
Right.
lost an election because the movement against him used humor, and he had no sense of
Right.
humor. And so he lost because for at least that period of time, the public and the voters of Hungary treated him as a little bit of a joke. Now he did claw his way back, and he's back in power. But I think that you don't have to do everything with a long face, and you don't have to do everything with a furrowed brow, even if the circumstances are difficult. You just get it done. Again, I'm hoping that that's something else that will attract people and make people comfortable in this movement. Is that, yeah, we're serious about making these changes take place and solving the problem, but we're not serious in our tone and in our, we're getting rid of the climate anxiety by acting on the problem. So that's the way I want it to feel. And I see all these criticisms, and I think there's some truth to it. The criticisms of Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, that they're disrupting everything and they're making people hate them and all that. Um, but I understand where they're coming from. I also don't dismiss them as showboats, because these are people who believe enough to go to jail to to address the problem. So
Right.
I'm not tactically along with them. I guess I sort of agree with the people who say that their ways are not working. I don't know that their ways can't work just because it hasn't worked yet. But I certainly don't have enough faith in it for it to be my way. Or if I were to do it, it wouldn't add anything, because those guys are doing their strategy much better than I could do their strategy. So, I don't have anything bad to say about other movements. There was one that started in Philly, I believe, and it's called the Sunrise Movement, and it was young people, again, just the way Greta has her group, young people who decided to lobby Congress, and they do that, and they've been in congressmen's offices and been filmed, and there's been film of them, trying to talk various officials into taking the climate crisis seriously. And they push specific pieces of legislation and things like that. I am at the point where I'm saying, that might have made sense 20 or 30 years ago, but governments move too slow, clearly, on this to uh, be useful on a crisis of this nature that requires the entire world and not just one government. But on the other hand, I can't be sure that these other folks or any of these other movements won't have a breakthrough. So I'm a big fan of multiple movements and multiple tactics and multiple efforts. But I have the one I'm focusing on.
Well, no, I think it's good that there's an organization like We Are Saners that looks at the positive. I truly believe 100% that people would be a lot happier if they burned less carbon. I mean, I think it's just the whole car culture world, the whole rampant consumerism. I don't believe it's making people happy.
No.
So I think it'd be nice to be in an organization where, like you say, you're not saying, well, oil is evil and this is stuff. You're just basically saying, hey, like, what kind of planet do you want to
Yeah,
live on?
yeah, that's it. I mean, uh, that's the focus. The focus is, we have a problem. Let's fix it and make things better. And
Right.
I mean, yeah, there's a little. I mean, there is where we are ridiculing the people who are not fixing things and look like they're just posturing. I mean, we're ridiculing them, but we're not. We're treating them as if they're being foolish rather than evil. Okay, that's sort of the way I feel. I actually think that there are a small number of actual psychopaths in the world, and probably most of them are in government or high level positions in corporations. But I still don't believe that most government officials and most high level corporate officials are actual psychopaths. I think that they're living in systems according to the rules those systems seem to be operating in. They're living in the world the way they found it. And if you're the head of Exxon, you feel like this is my career and I have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. And oil does some good in the world. All the industries use oil. So, I mean, there's a grain of truth to all of that. So who am I to say, he's the bad guy? All I can say is the scientists are right, and oil is destroying the planet we live on. So that's why we have to stop, not because Darren Woods is a bad guy. I actually always say that when I meet all these bad guys, I almost always like them. So it's not a personal thing. It's dealing with a situation rather than a bad guy.
Right. Well, we're past the 30-minute mark, so we should probably
All
wrap
right.
it up. Unless there's anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, I just thank you for the opportunity to appear on this. I hope it gets a lot of viewers eventually by the fourth or fifth episode when people are finally realize how great your program is and start tuning in. Um, so, and I hope I did a good job
Well,
presenting.
yeah, you did it. Yeah, you did a great job, and I think I'm not so well. Who knows what's going to happen to the channel? But I think the good thing is that again, and I do notice this. Well, one person commented on the um, on the Brian Keane interview. He said, "Oh, I've always wondered what he looked like and what he had to say." So this video, I think, will be a good start. Sorry, it's my grandson. Will be a good start, a place for people to go to when they see We Are the Saners. They see you, your articles, that they could say, oh, it's nice to hear the person talk.
Yeah.
So I think this video, I've learned a lot. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're welcome.